Live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2056. Hidden in the margins, what overlooked records can tell you. So, bet you've never thought about looking in the margin of records. You can find all sorts of really crazy information in there. Sometimes the biggest genealogy breakthroughs aren't in the main records like births, deaths, marriages, census reports. They're in the small details that people overlook. A tiny note in a census or a remark in a court case or an apprenticeship paper might hold the missing piece of your family puzzle. So, fun fact, some US Census records contain handwritten notes by the enumerators about the people they visited. Some flattering, some not so much, and they're usually written in the margins or some comments somewhere on the line about that person. So let's dive into where you can find where you may find some of these comments. So when life got complicated, court records captured details. So we're going to have a look at court, guardianship, and apprenticeship records. So the guardianship records that traced orphans and lost family members. If a child was orphan, court records often listed who took custody and why. Indentured children and apprentices, you've got orphans that were sometimes placed in trade instead of families. So instead of being placed with a family, they were sent off to be an apprentice with somebody. So, for example, a researcher found her ancestor listed as orphaned in the 1850 census was apprenticed to a blacksmith at age 10. There were no child labor laws in this time when all this happened. And where can you find these records? Probate records, county archives, and state libraries will have copies of these records for indentured children and apprentices, and the court records stating who, the probate courts, that's the other one I was trying to think, probate court. Many children entered trades through apprenticeship contracts, which often list the name of the parents or guardians, the master craftsman or employer, the terms of the apprenticeship, sometimes meal, clothing, and even wages. An example being an 18th century tailor's apprentice record revealed that a young man later became a famous fashion designer. You never know. They could start off as an orphan child under an apprenticeship and end up being famous for whatever it was they went into apprenticeship for. You can find hidden drama in court records, land disputes. Sometimes the family relationships will say, for example, my brother stole my inheritance. Oh, my uncle had a brother. Well, of course, your uncle had a brother, but, well, my dad had a brother, didn't know my dad had a brother, didn't know my great-grandfather had a brother, you never know. In divorce records, many include affidavits, property details, and even personal letters. Criminal court cases, sometimes ancestors had an unexpected encounter with the law. For example, a woman researching her great-great-grandfather found he was jailed for illegal moonshining. You never know what you're going to find. Even if your ancestor wasn't in court, they may have been listed as a witness, a juror, or a neighbor in someone else's case. Yeah, so this is nice so this works out well when the records are digitized and they're searchable, not only digitized, but also searchable, or they may have a searchable index, which tells you where to go in the online record. Or it could be that the images are there, you just got to give it a rough guess of whereabouts it is. They may have an index at the front that will tell you where that name is mentioned, and then you've got to go find that page. And in some cases, it's not searchable at all. It's just painstaking going through records, seeing if they were mentioned or anything else. And you could hear something about it, like reading a newspaper article or something that was around the time of your great-great-grandfather, and it could mention that in the newspaper article, it could mention that they were a witness. But it may not necessarily be that they were on the jury. But if it's just a small town and you've got a jury, there's a good chance your great-great-grandfather may have been on the jury, especially in the days where it was men who were served on the jury, not women. And so then you could go down to your local archives, your local court, where they hold all the records and everything else, and have a look through those for that particular case to see if your grandfather was a juror on there or a witness, especially if you have that newspaper article that says he was a witness. Or it could have been his neighbor, in which case he probably was called as a witness. Other records that you can find are school records, alumni lists, and yearbooks as genealogy clues. From report cards to class rosters, school records can be a gold mine. The first one, school records, more than just grades. Attendance logs show where families lived at a specific time. Some early schools recorded parents' names, occupations, and even addresses. Special notes sometimes listed why a child left school, illness, relocation, or even wartime service. Or it could be that they needed to be, it was the harvesting time of, it was, if they lived on a farm, it was harvesting time, all hands on deck during harvesting time. So the kids didn't get to go to school during harvest time. They were busy working on the farm. Number 2, yearbooks. They're a snapshot in time. You got senior portraits, a rare early photo of an ancestor, maybe. Clubs and activities give clues to personality and interests. Handwritten messages may contain nicknames, friendships, or personal notes. Remember, when you open, not so much in New Zealand, but in the States here, when you open up those yearbooks, well, especially when I was at school, we didn't have much of a yearbook. It was just a little thin book, but it gave us that snapshot in time. Where they have the yearbooks over here, where everybody writes. You go around and you gather, get friends to write messages and stuff in there. You may find in a book, oh, there's my great-grandfather has signed this one. For example, a woman found her grandfather's 1925 yearbook with a note from his best friend that said, "Can't wait to start our bakery business," confirming a family story about their bakery. So you could find things like, you never know. Where you get, people sign the yearbooks and things. Go through the signatures, go through and have a look and see what was written in those. Those can be gold mines. Where to find old school records? Look in local historical societies and county archives. School boards, some kept attendance records for decades. Alumni associations and digital archives. A researcher found her ancestor attended a military academy, explaining why he later joined the army. And here's a challenge. Check online archives for your ancestors' yearbooks. Many have been digitized, and you get access to them in some cases for free. So check archives. They are busy. There's every now and again I get a little green flag in Ancestry, and I go and check to see what it is. And it's a yearbook is a whole bunch of yearbooks have just been uploaded, and I've found Brad's ones in there. I found his brother's photos in the yearbook. In yearbook photographs. So there's all sorts of things that you can find in there. So check, just keep checking, just keep going back. And because they're bringing more and more online as they undergo a humongous project. Marginal notes, the hidden gems in census, church, and military records. The best clues sometimes ascribed in the margins. Census notes and annotations, enumerators' comments. Some added notes about the family they visited. An example, an 1817 census note read, "Lives alone, raises chickens, town storyteller." It just livens it up. You got somebody who lives alone, they raise chickens, and they're the town storyteller. What a great person to go and research. Were they? And if you find them, and if you find that comment in the area where your ancestors lived, see if you can find any records about the storyteller. Maybe they told some stories about your parents or things like that, or great-grandparents and things. Idiotic and insane columns in the 1800 census recorded mental health conditions. Yes, they actually had a column there that said idiotic and another one that said insane, and they had yes and no written in them. Discrepancies in ages or birthplace. Was your ancestor lying or just forgetful? Or was it somebody? Now, when it comes to discrepancies in ages or birthplace, your ancestor may not have been giving the enumerator the information. There was a time when if there was nobody in the house when they visited, a next door neighbor maybe say, "Oh, I can tell you all about the family." They've got no idea when they just guesstimating the year that they were born and guesstimating where they were born. So if you find those discrepancies in there, it could be that it wasn't your ancestor that gave the information. It may have been a close family friend. It could have been a neighbor. It could have been somebody else in the house, like even the maid or the servant who provided the information about the family. And sometimes, years get away on you and they kind of not really forget, but just kind of at that point in time may not fully remember, oh yeah, well, you're about 10 and you're about 3. Well, you were born a couple of months ago, just that sort of thing, because sometimes they just don't remember those details. They're not important. They've got other things to worry about. Number 2, church records. Margins tell a story. Baptism records with handwritten notes often include added info about the child's future about the child's future marriage. Yes, sometimes in parish records, they will go back to the baptismal record and may put a note on, not always, may put a note on there on who they later married. The one that I showed you on my second great-grandfather, it had the date of baptism, it had the baptismal date, and then the person who was doing the baptism had added in there the date of birth, which was not a column, and they just made a note of it. Crossed out names and rewritten details hints at a name change or an adoption. A woman found out that her great-grandmother's baptismal record had a scribed note 20 years later, married in 1901 to John Smith. So that's an example of that. In military records and draft notes, some military files have physical descriptions of soldiers, height, weight, eye color, scars, and in some cases weight. Handwritten discharge notes sometimes list why someone was released from the service. For example, a Civil War discharge note revealed that the soldier left due to tuberculosis, a clue that may lead you across to medical records. I love looking at the military records, and in some cases they are on fold. If you go to fold3.com, and if you're with Ancestry and up on the whole access level, you actually get a membership into Fold3 through Ancestry. And sometimes they can lead you to just one or two files out of that military file for that person, or they may lead you to the entire packet, which could be 50, 60 pages. And you're just going through there. You've got their draft card in there, and there could be comments written on the draft card. You've got their military service in there. Were there any awards or medals that they were awarded? If there was any time, there was one guy. Let's see if I can remember this. He was he had been shot, recovered. This is what the military record. He'd come in with a gunshot wound. He recovered. He was released. He was back a week later with another gunshot wound, and then they gave him a medical discharge, and it's all written there on his medical file. And it's like, we're not putting any. We're not. You're out of here, mate. You're out of here. So you can see stuff like that, and the note written on that particular record had something about being a too high a risk of being shot by the enemy. And so being discharged. it was some funny note, and I'm like looking at it going, okay, yep, he needs to be out of there. And the first gunshot wound he had grazed his head. It said that it was a head injury that had grazed his head. So obviously the bullet had gone past. And then he comes back a week after being recovered from that. He comes back a week later and with another gunshot wound. And so they decided to discharge him because he was too much of a high risk and send him home. If a census or a church record looks normal, check the margins or back pages. You never know what might be hiding there. If you get a copy, if you get to see the actual certificate, turn it over. What's written on the back? If you've got the certificate, turn it over. What's written on the back. Sometimes when they copy them, they only copy the front. They don't copy what's on back. And that's something that you have to specifically request. If there is anything written on the back of the certificate, can you please copy it too? The best genealogy discovers are often hidden in the small details. And as I remember saying this the other day, if you're a Jack Reacher fan, you will know that his favorite saying is that details matter. In anything, details matter. So the best genealogy discoveries are often hidden in the small details. Court cases, school records, even handwritten notes can reveal surprises about your ancestors. So your challenge is to find a record in your family tree and look beyond the basics. Any unexpected notes or clues. Search yearbooks, apprenticeship papers, and school attendance records. You might find a forgotten story. And next time you're researching, don't skip the details. The most interesting stories are sometimes in the margins, waiting to be discovered. And they are there. Details matter. They really do. Everything is in the details. When you're looking at genealogy, it is the details. That is why we're always saying, if you're looking at baptismal records, like I showed you on my second great-grandfather's one, was it last week or the week before, where there was his entry there, and we went through that entry, and then I showed you the one directly below. If I just looked at that entry and not looked at the one below, I wouldn't have found out what had happened, that something had happened to my third great-grandfather. Because when I went and looked up the marriage record for my second great-grandmother and her second husband, I found out that when they got married, and that baptism took place on his 6th birthday. So that was done in 1855. On the 1851 census, it said that she was a wife of a jeweler. That's her occupation, wife of a jeweler. And she got married in 1852 to the bookbinder guy. What happened between the 1851 census and 1852 is at some point her husband died, because on her marriage certificate for 1852, it said that she was a widow. So we know that somewhere there so there was a clue that he had died there sometime between the 1851 census and when she got married in 1852. When we look at the baptismal record of 1855, it had her current address there, and then it had that the father was, not is, was, past tense, and it said where he was from. So that gives me a clue that, one, he died sometime between the 1851 census, which I think I'm just going to be guessing at that point. It was sometime around June. He died, it might have been April. Hang on. Somewhere around that first half of the year. He died between then and when she got married in 1852. So I've got a small window of about when he died. I know where he was living at the time that he died because there was his residence listed on the baptismal record in 1855. So now I've got those two little clues that I can take, because his last name was Price, his first name was William, his middle name was Henry. Yeah, was he going by William? Was he going by Henry? I can't find him I've found several William Prices on the 1851 census. I don't know, and some of them were married, so he may have been one of those. And these are guys that were listed as a lodger in somebody else's household. So he was not, and it was just his name. It was the family that lived there, and he was listed as one of the lodgers. He was the only Price in the house, and it just had William Price. It didn't have, and I found a couple of Henry Prices as well that are on the 1851 census. So I haven't found him yet. Still looking. And he's one of those people that they got married before my second great grandfather, William Henry Morris Price, appeared in 1849. So they got married between the census. So there's never a census report. There was never not a census report with the two of them together as a married couple. Because on 1851 census, it listed that she was the head of the house and the wife of a jeweler. He wasn't there. He wasn't in the household that night. So we don't know where he was. He may have been on a ship in the middle of the ocean, either going to the east or coming back from the east, because he was a jeweler. And on his son's marriage certificate, it said that he was a foreign agent. And that was the first thing I saw. I thought, oh, we got a spy in the family. Yep, no. Nope, no spy in the family. He was just a jeweler, but he was obviously one that traveled. So immigration records, we're looking at the passenger logs and all of that. He's a very hard man to find. I have to tell you, we've been looking for a lot of years. It took us 3 years. It took 3 of us, 3 cousins. There was, what was it? It was myself, a second cousin, and was it a first cousin? No, it wasn't a first cousin. It was a second cousin once removed. Or were we all second cousins? I'm trying to remember now if we were all second cousins. Might have all been second. No, there was a one removed in there. The guy in Australia was once removed. And the one in New Zealand and me. And this is when I was living in Virginia. This was years ago. And the 3 of us collaborated on this, and we're constantly swatching it. Hey, look at this. Check this out. What do you think of this one? Could this be him? And then I was the one that found the baptismal record and sent off and says, what do you think? So now we knew. They were sort of like, oh my gosh, she got married again. And then we found her marriage certificate. And so now we're trying to find out what happened to him. And it's been a few years. It's been more than, what are we in, 2025? So it has probably been about 20 years since we found my second great grandfather, and we're still searching for the third great grandfather. So yeah, sometimes genealogy takes a while. You have to be patient. And sometimes you'll find that little note in the margin, like we found that little note on his baptismal record that said that his father was from, not is from, but was from, which meant that he had passed, because they wouldn't have put was if he was still alive. And it had his info, and it had where he last resided. So we knew where he last resided, and now we're looking around that area. We still haven't found him. We will find him eventually. It will be a great breakthrough when we do find him. But check those margins, check those extra comments and things. If you're looking at records like we did with that one, where it's where it's an entry in a book, look above, look below. If you're looking at a census report, click the button that says check out the neighbors that are on this page, and also go to the page before and the page after, because you will often find communities of people grouped together. Families may be within walking distance of each other. And you might find them either on the same street or the next street over. You never know. So check those records. And if you get the chance to see a certificate in a book, turn it over and see if there's anything written on the back. You never know what you might find. And with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening. We'll catch you guys back here